Yeah, hello everyone. Today we gather here under the patronage of Dr. Faiz Al-Dhafiri, the director of Kuwait University, the president of Kuwait University, to hopefully mark new routes in the world of academic research. We are honored to have Dr. Adil Al-Hnayan, the vice president of academic affairs in Kuwait University, and the acting vice president, the vice president for the academic affairs and the academic support, and the head of the promotion and appointment committees on the university level. I thank him for joining us. Our honorable guest speaker today is the well-distinguished Dr. Anand Venkateswaran. That's very hard to pronounce.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Serves as a professor in finance at the Northeastern University. His academic research focuses on empirical corporate finance with emphasis on the incentives of economic agents. His academic work has been published in a number of professional journals, including Journal of Finance and Quantitative Analysis, Journal of Banking and Finance, Journal of Accounting Research, and others. He also presented at the Academy of Financial Services, Financial Management Association, and other professional organizations. For years, we have sought after partnership with prestigious international collaboration, highlights the importance of research enhancement. And that's why by collaborating with Northeastern University, we can say that our focus is to enrich research across facilities using an interdisciplinary approach. Lastly, I would like to extend heartfelt appreciation to all of my colleagues who turned up in such a short notice, and of course, thank you to the rest of you for joining us. So I'll give the podium to you, Anand.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Muhammad, for a very kind introduction. So, and also for the opportunity to present here. It's a privilege, and I'm very happy to share my 2 cents with all of you. So I'm going to talk, but I will pause after every slide, or here and there. And please feel free to interrupt me or ask any questions. This is not a technical talk; it's more general. It's a more of a sharing of my experiences. So feel free to interrupt at any time. All right, so let's jump into it. So basically, the purpose of my talk is to publish in academic journals. Now, from my experience, my undergraduation is chemical engineering. And then I was hired by an investment bank because they had a lot of exposure to the oil sector. So they thought being a chemical engineer would help them understand and evaluate some of these projects. So I went to the investment bank and I started working there. I worked there for 5 years as an investment banker with no finance knowledge, with simply, like an engineering background. But so somehow I became successful at my job. The reason was, I don't know the reason. I was lucky. I don't know what it was, but I was pretty good at my job. Then one day I realized, even though I'm good at it, I don't know why I'm good at it. I don't know what I'm talking about. I really know what I'm talking about. So that's why I decided to pursue a career in academics. Now, my main reason to come to academia was to do research. And the first thing I was told is doing research is a very, very interesting and rewarding experience, as long as it is for the sake of doing research. However, publishing is a very different story. This is like saying, I like to cook. These days, most of us are at home, so I'm guessing we're all experimenting with cooking here. Now, suddenly one of us says, oh, okay, I'm very good at cooking. Let me start a restaurant. Running a restaurant is not the same as having a passion for cooking and being good at it. They are 2 different things. So I will try my best to integrate this experience with you, and integration of research and publishing. So publishing in top tier journals is very rewarding. The payoff is very convex. I got tenure in my university because of publishing in top tier universities. So that's the payoff. The reputation, recognition for the university, external people, what they think, all this is based on publishing in top tier journals. And the higher the rank of the journal, the more is the recognition. So there are a few elite journals which are very sought after. Like, for example, in finance, I can tell you there are 4. And I've been fortunate to publish in the top journal in every business field except marketing. I have published in Journal of Finance, Journal of Accounting Research, Management Science, and Production and Operations Management. So this spans the whole business school except for, Journal of Marketing, where I have not yet gone. So I love doing interdisciplinary research because I think that's very interesting. Now, this has come at a very high cost, and it has taken years sometimes to publish in these top outlets. And I can tell you that there are considerable challenges involved in publishing in this top tier. But I will share, every experience I have. Just to give you a little more perspective, the top 4 finance journals receive about 4,000 papers a year, submissions, 4,000 submissions per year. And the acceptance rate is about 4 to 6% combined, which means they are going to publish about 200 papers, all the 4 total, in 1 year out of 4,000. The turnaround time can range from 8 months to 3 years. My life has been hard. I have always been on the right side of this distribution. So for me, every single publication has taken years. I have not been lucky enough to publish in a few months, and it has not happened. It has always been the hard road, but it has been worth it. 90% of the papers are rejected in the first round. And this is true not just for the finance journals. I am talking about all the top tier journals. I have gone through some of their statistics because I work in interdisciplinary in all these different areas. I have looked at journals in marketing, in international business and strategy, supply chain management, accounting, of course finance, and the average rejection rate in these top journals is more than 90% in the first round. The best outcome you can expect after a first round submission is a revise and resubmit, which we all call R&R. It's a golden ticket. So if you ever get an R&R, it's a great feeling because at least now we have some idea or some checklist of what the reviewer wants. Otherwise, we are submitting a paper and it can be rejected for any reason. The contribution is not good. It's not a good fit. Your analysis is not good. So I'm going to share some of the rejects I have got next. So what I'm saying is a revise and resubmit is a golden ticket. So this is what you should aim for in the first submission. This is my experience. Give people a mask and they will tell you what they really think.
We're having someone with a mask right?
Sorry?
We're having Dr. Adil on a mask. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, please go ahead. And I wanted to say these days, this is no longer a figurative sentence. This is literally everybody is wearing a mask. So all reviewing in top journals is at least one-sided blind, which means you will never know who's the reviewer. So if you do that, people will really tell you what they think of your paper. Not like our friends and family who tell you, oh, this is a fantastic idea, I think you should pursue it. And then you spend 2 years on the idea and then the reviewer says, this is useless. Why did you waste time on this? So reviewers are going to tell you what they think. So it's better to be prepared. Here is some of the rejections that I have got. The analysis is woefully inadequate. This is from my own experience. Okay, the analysis is woefully. Just say inadequate. Why do you have to add woefully? It's adding insult to injury. But that's what the mask gives you, protection. I don't know who this person is, but that's what they think of my work. The statistical significance is there, but not economic significance. So why should anyone care? This is what I have got. These are all quotes from my own reviewer letters. Here is another gem. Has no one addressed this before? Probably for a good reason. You know, they're talking about my research question. They're saying, why has nobody done this before? Maybe it's not worth doing it. That's why nobody has done it. So you see, language is harsh. This is the best. This is from Journal of Financial Economics. While the paper is not publishable in its current form, perhaps a revised version that addresses all the reviewers' comments. Now I'm thinking, oh, I see the word revise. Maybe it's a revise and resubmit. So I have hopes. Then I turn the page and it says would be of interest to another journal. You know, for 3 seconds, you have the hope that it's a revise. So I get the first R, but not the second R. At least put it on the same page. So I don't have hope for 3 seconds, no, till I turn the page. But that's how the profession is. It's cruel, you know. Nevertheless, every single paper of these has ended up at a very good top journal, despite all these comments. Because sometimes you have to, you know, persist. You have to treat criticism constructively and improve the paper and, you know, take their words. So if somebody tells you the analysis is inadequate, that means really it's not there. So it's time to do more analysis. So this is just to give you some background and, you know, perspective on what life is in these top journals. It's harsh, it's cruel, it's challenging, but it's definitely worth it. Any questions, anyone? Any thoughts? Okay.
You prefer to keep the question and interaction at a later stage because
okay, fine, yeah. fine. Let me go ahead. All right, so this is, like I said, despite all these comments, all these papers have ended up in, you know, Journal of Finance, Journal of Accounting Research, Management Science, POM. So these are all top journals. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 aspects of research, which is the idea and contribution, execution, and exposition. So I'm dividing this, my 2 cents, my suggestions into 3 parts. The first part is based on my experience of all this. The research question and contribution are paramount. That's the most important thing, because that's the easiest way for people to reject. See, one has to understand one thing. Unlike the judicial system, where you are innocent until proven guilty, in our system, this review process, you are guilty until proven innocent. So they are going to assume that your idea sucks. It's not useless. It's useless. So is your main research question clearly defined and articulated? Why do we need to know the answer to this question? Who cares? What gap in the literature does this study fill? These are all things you must be able to answer in the first paragraph or the first 2 paragraphs in the paper, in the introduction. The next thing you have to ask yourself is the idea or question original, relevant, and generalizable? Now, most of us think we are doing something original, but it's very difficult to do something truly original. A truly original paper will have no citations, but we cite so much literature when we write a paper. That means we are basing our study on something else. So the way you say it is original, the way you make it original is important. So do something novel, you know, and that's what reviewers will like. Is it relevant? So right now, if I'm going to, let's say, do a study which says, do companies pay dividends or not? What effect does this have on the stock price? This is a very standard finance question that was, you know, hot back in 1980s. But right now it is not relevant. Nobody cares if the company pays dividend or not. So it's not relevant. Third, is it generalizable? I know there are so many studies which will say okay, there is this strange law in India, and they use that data set using that strange law to conduct analysis to see, is this, for example, in India, there is a law which says every company must donate 2% of their profits, pre-tax profits, to corporate social responsibility. This law is applicable only in India. Now people will say, there are many studies which say, okay, is this law, does it have an effect on society? But the problem is all the journal editors will say, yeah, but that law exists only in India. Why do I care? I'm in United States, I'm in Kuwait, I'm in London. It doesn't apply to the larger world. It only applies in one small context in one country. So it's not generalizable. I'm not interested in this topic. So these are the kind what I'm talking about. It's try to make the study more generalizable. That's based on the idea. What about the findings, the contribution? Is it a first order effect, or is it a second, third, fourth, is it making a small difference? For top journals, they are looking for first order effects, which means it should have a fundamental effect. If you're looking at the relation between a variable X and its impact on variable Y, you want to say that the variable X significantly affects variable Y, not just, has a tiny effect. So ask yourself, is it a first order or a higher order effect? Be your own worst critic. This is something I have learned. Initially, I was very optimistic. Oh, this is a fantastic idea. Let me work on it. And then I spent 1 or 2 months collecting the data, working on it. And then one day in some corridor talk with some professor when I was a student, they would say, oh, don't waste time. It's not going to go anywhere. Why? Because there are so many alternate explanations. You cannot, this is not worth pursuing. It is not going to make it to a top journal. So you have to be your own worst critic. You have to tell yourself, okay, this idea is probably not making sense. Here's why. So try to kill every idea until you cannot. If you cannot, then that means it has passed all these layers, all these tests, because you can lie to everybody except yourself. So that's why you have to be your own worst critic, because others will anyway find flaws with it. So might as well do it before somebody else will find the problem. So what I like to say is I like to be pessimistic when it comes to my ideas. I want to start by saying it's not a good idea and then prove that maybe it is. I have a simple test for passion, because unless you're passionate, this is not a sustainable process. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of persistence to publish in top journals. And let me spend a minute on interdisciplinary. This is even more complicated because not only do you have to know your area, you have to know the other area as well. So when I'm publishing in supply chain, I have to know the finance literature and the supply chain literature. So it's a lot of work and it truly requires passion. So I have a smell test for this. If I would rather watch this work on this project rather than watch an interesting movie, then I think it's a good sign that you will be able to sustain for a few years to work on this project and make it happen. All right, so that's for the idea and contribution. So these are all, big picture questions that you can keep in the back of your mind before you venture into these projects. Execution. Now, execution, there are two types of papers, theoretical papers and empirical papers. Theoretical papers are based on models, mathematical equations, proof of something. So that's separate. Empirical papers, execution is the key. For theoretical papers, the proof, the novelty of the proof and how many different, realistic scenarios you have considered, that's the key. Here, it's all about the data set. So there are some really influential papers out there which have used very unique data to answer interesting questions. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do I have some data which is, if I'm going to write a paper which says, okay, do large firms make more money do large firms have higher stock returns than small firms? So what do I need for this? I need the size of the firm and I need stock returns. Everybody, every researcher on earth has this data. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some echo here. Is it? Okay, thank you.
If you turn down your own speaker, that would.
It could be that somebody is unmute, so everybody has to be unmute. So if the participants could mute themselves, that would be easier.
Okay.
Anand?
Yes, yeah,
go ahead.
I'm good. Yeah. Okay. So, for example, if you use these generic data sets, it's difficult to publish in top journals. So in marketing, for example, they are looking for some interesting survey. These days, everybody is downloading all this COVID data across the world because that's going to answer some interesting questions. Like, for example, if you're in decision sciences or supply chain, how has the COVID disrupted supply chain? What is the effect of a shock to the supply chain or oil prices on, the stock markets? Because it appears as if, at least in the US, the stock market is still doing well, despite the fact that there is a pandemic going on. Yes, it went down by 30%, but it's back up. So now the year is still in the green. It's not in the red. So nobody knows what's going on. So these are the kinds of questions for which you might need unique data. So there are some standard data sets which have company related information, mergers and acquisitions, stock prices, supply chain. All these are pretty standard databases. Unique databases are typically ones which you get through a survey or through manual hand collection. And if you can get those are going to be really useful in answering some specific question which is truly original and nobody has looked at before, and this data is helping you. So to give you a couple of examples, one of them is there is a person at Aalto University who uses Sweden's military data set. Sweden collects every single thing from your height, weight, age, education, the color of your hair, even that is collected in gender, everything when they do the military. And this data set is available for public if you can read and understand Swedish. So there are people who have used this to ask questions like, personality traits. How important are personality traits in making you a good manager or a bad manager? So this question cannot be answered with standard databases that we have here. This can only be answered because that Swedish military database has details of your personality that will help you answer this question. Again, there is another paper which wants to ask whether risk-averse managers are better than risk-loving managers. So the way they answer this question is to look at the gender of the firstborn child of US CEOs and trace that history and look at what happened to them in their childhood. And if their heir was a male or a female, did they take over the family? Did they not take over the family? So it's a very interesting paper, and it uses this kind of unique data. These are just two very outlier examples, but the broad point I'm making is try to get something which is not easily obtained by other people. So competition will be a little less. First is also, once you have your data, top journals are very particular about the ability to replicate findings. They will not publish a paper and then find out that 3 years later, there is some PhD student somewhere who says all the results in this paper are not correct. Because if you change this one thing, if you drop this one observation, this is a problem. So you have to clean the data set and check for outliers. There is one famous paper which was published in the Journal of Finance, and years later, 3-4 years later, that paper was in a lot of hot water a lot of controversy around that paper because there was one PhD student who tried to replicate that paper and found that all you have to do is drop one company, drop Apple from the sample, and none of the results will hold. Why? Because in Apple, in those years, Steve Jobs took a salary of just $1 for many years. He was the lowest paid employee in Apple, and yet he was the CEO of Apple. So I don't want to get into the technicalities, but basically, if you drop Apple from that sample, you will find that none of the results will be as strong. In fact, some of them may even reverse. This is hugely damaging for the author and for the school. So to avoid all this, you have to clean and check for outliers. There are many sanity checks that you need to do for the data before you even start the analysis. These days, just showing X has an effect on Y is, I can almost go to the extent to say it's useless because nobody cares. It's causation. People are, it doesn't matter which journal, marketing, finance, decision science, if you're aiming for the top journal, you have to establish causality. This is not easy. Showing X causes Y is very different from saying X is related to Y, because correlation is only saying when X is high, Y is high. When X is low, Y is low. It doesn't say X causes Y. So this is something which you need to pay attention to. Whatever the question, pay attention to causality because that's what it is. Now, in technical terms, we call this identification of the parameters and resolution of endogeneity of the coefficient estimates. So this is something which is gaining more and more importance, and the top finance, economics, accounting, marketing, management journals this is the first thing they will look for in the analysis. Has the author resolved the identification issue? Econometrics is becoming as important, if not more important than the economics. 10-15 years ago, economics, what is the impact of oil prices on trade? That is important. Now they want to know, does oil price cause the trade to go up or go down, or is it the other way around? Does trade affect oil prices? I don't know the answer to this question, but there is, just to tell you what people are doing to say which way the causation is going. They are looking at satellite images of ships when they pass the standard shipping lanes, and these satellite images will tell you the length of the shadow that is cast by the oil tankers. And from that, they are able to estimate how much oil that ship is carrying, and therefore an estimate of the oil supply and the demand. And using that, changes in those, they are trying to identify how this affects international trade. Similarly, people are using satellite images and machine learning techniques to take pictures of roofs in Florida. Why? Because they want to price insurance with one photograph. So there are companies that take these pictures using satellite images of roofs in say Florida, which was typically done by inspection agents. They would go to each house, look at the roof and say, okay, your roof is 50% good, so your premium is $300 per month. Now with one satellite image, they rent the satellite, they can take a picture of 10 square kilometers in one day, analyze it and price 10,000 houses in one day. So now they have all this data which is available, which economists are using to study and see what is the effect of this on insurance prices. So this is where the research is going these days. Very high-tech, cutting-edge methods to establish causality. So when I got the invitation, some of you indicated that it would be nice to know which software to use. My answer is all of them. There is no more. We don't have the luxury of saying I only know this coding or that coding. If you really want to go to the top level journals, like what I'm talking about, machine learning is best done with either R or Python. So you have to know that, no choice. But all the statistical analysis, Stata is really good because Stata is not open source. Every single command in Stata is vetted and it is certified and everybody knows the answer. So you cannot mess with a Stata command. If you run a regression in Stata, you will get the same answer every single time. And it's also very robust. And so you need Stata for many econometric techniques, cutting edge econometrics. Similarly, you need SAS if you're working with big data. SAS is a behemoth. SAS is used for, it's very stable. You can analyze billions and billions of observations. So right now, for example, I'm working with US patent data. So I have, for example, 12 million patents, and I'm analyzing the text of these patents. So think about the size of that file. Each patent is about 10 pages. So I have 120 million pages of text data. This runs into gigabytes and sometimes even terabytes. To convert this text into numeric data and analyze it is best with SAS, because the R or Stata cannot do this volume of data. So this is big data. Python is also very good for unstructured data. People want to know what is the effect of Twitter news on company, say, stock prices. Tweets are not standard. They are unformatted, unstructured. So to analyze unstructured data, you need packages from Python. So basic moral of the story, you use the software that does the job for you. So we don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. We need to know all of them, at least enough to solve the problem that is at hand. Now, there are some key points for execution in terms of publishability. Even if the analysis is very sophisticated, machine language, all this big stuff, begin with the simple and progress to the sophisticated. Suppose I want to know if X causes Y. Can we at least see a plot of X on Y first? Let's start with a simple graph. Is this saying anything? If it's not there, then we cannot torture the data and run sophisticated methods to get the answer. If the simple test does not reveal anything, the complicated test is irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because the complicated test, the sophistication is there as a robustness. It is to show that my simple is not oversimplified. I am not missing anything. That's why I'm doing the sophisticated. But if the simple doesn't show anything, then the sophisticated only means I have tortured the data to get the answer I want. So that is not the way to go. Even the top journals, the first thing they want to see is simple, what does the simple regression or graph or, summary statistics tell me? Include all controls. Here is a classic example. Somebody did a regression of likelihood of dying and are you a smoker? 1 if you're a smoker, 0 if you're a not smoker. Simple, logistic type of analysis. And they found that non-smokers, smokers are less likely to die than non-smokers. Puzzling finding, right? Why? Because they did not. So obviously the smokers are all young. The non-smokers are old. Older people are more likely to die than younger people. So this is why, no wonder they found this. Why? Because they forgot the main control, which is age. If you control for age, then smokers are more likely to die than non-smokers, right? So it's a very simple example to illustrate no matter what the problem, just use all the control variables and then make sure you're not, finding something which is completely counterintuitive because of a simple error like this, not including, an important control variable. Eliminate many alternative explanations. I have sat in presentations room where the speaker will spend 1 hour presenting a paper he has been working on for 3 years. And then somebody will say, I can explain all your results with this alternate explanation. So, for example, you do some major complicated analysis of the effect of oil on trade policy and say that as oil prices go up, trade suffers. OK, somebody will say it has nothing to do with oil prices. it has to do with the stock market performance. So stock market performance is highly correlated with trade, with bilateral trade. So something like this. So what I'm saying is eliminate as many alternate explanations as possible, because that's the first thing the referee will think of, how to explain your results with some other story which is not your story. So all the stories must be eliminated. All the other stories must be eliminated. This is a very good technique I have learned. Use placebo tests to rule out coincidences. People will say, yeah, you know, even if COVID did not come, the stock market would have gone down by 30% because oil prices are low. You know, it's a coincidence that you're saying it's because of this pandemic. So you say, OK, suppose I take a similar period some other time in history when oil prices were also low and show that this stock market did not collapse. Then I can say that, you know, in both periods, oil prices were down, stock market was down, but only now is the stock market down. Before, the stock market was not down. You know, something like this. Use placebo tests to rule out coincidences. So falsify the period of analysis. Perform a numerous battery of robustness checks, because these are all things for which the paper will be rejected. Yeah, but you did not control for age. Your sample is too short. It does not include, it has too many small companies, you know, this kind of stuff. So do many, you know, robustness checks. This is an important thing for empirical papers in any field that I find. To make your main result more convincing, find subsamples where the result is amplified or attenuated, meaning where the result is stronger or weaker. And this can be very intuitive. So these are all things that give you a lot of credibility in the result. At the end of the day, the referee is looking for three things. Is the idea worthy of pursuit? Is the execution reliable and credible? These are all things that go to the reliability of the execution, to the credibility of your results. So make the referee or reviewer trust your results and not think of it as something which is, you know, just somebody did some, you know, we can find whatever we want. We can make the data show whatever we want. We are all researchers. We know this. So the credibility comes from these kinds of tests. And finally, the last thing the reviewers and editors look for is exposition. The best ideas and flawless execution can be lost in very poor exposition. Exposition does not mean language and grammar. Many of us in the profession are non-native speakers. It's not about the language or the grammar. We may have perfect language and grammar, or even this goes for even native speakers. Exposition is about, is the research, for example, is the research question clearly stated in the first paragraph? 4,000 submissions. The editor is going to read. So let's take one journal. The editor receives 1,000 submissions a year. OK, out of this 1,000 submissions, let's divide this into about 1,300 days in a year. That's 3 to 4 papers per day. He is also getting 3 to 4 review reports for earlier submissions per day. So this person has to read 8 papers a day. How much time do you think they are going to spend on your paper? I would say not more than a minute or two. I mean, Alvaro can shed more light on this. In 1 minute, if they don't know what you're doing, that's it, it's gone. So that first paragraph better be very clear. Let's not start with, you know, so and so, it is widely believed, you know, all this throat clearing stuff. Just get straight to the point very quickly. In the first paragraph, people should know what is this paper about. And what's the contribution? Is this coming through? All this is about the exposition. Is the paper positioned clearly with relevant literature, sample data, methodology? So in the interest of time, I'm going to go fast. Does the discussion of result tie back to the hypothesis result? So this is important. Every time you discuss result, tie it back to the hypotheses. Revise, rearrange, rewrite until some non-area person. If you're in finance, give it to a marketing person. Can they follow? There is always a better way to write the same thing. So make sure it's very well written before you submit. You have one chance. I have included a couple of good links here. Writing tips from John Cochran. He's the finance professor at University of Chicago and has very good tips. So I've included a couple of tips here. Common pitfalls to look for, things that I have learned my lessons from. Me too ideas. This big shot worked on this paper. Let me also work on this paper, but I'm going to use data from emerging markets instead of developed markets. This is the same thing, data related extensions. It may end up in some journal, but not in a top journal. Unfocused questions that seem important, but which you cannot explain in simple terms to an outsider. So as academics, sometimes we have the habit of complicating things too much because we want to sound smart. When it comes to publishing and journals, the best papers in the top journals are very simply explained. They can be explained to anyone in any audience in less than 2 sentences. So that's important. Also avoiding my professor, my advisor, my colleague thinks this is a good idea. Yes, but they're not going to do the job. We have to sit here and run the SAS and the Stata and the R and code and clean and write. We have to do all the work. So even if my advisor or my senior professor thinks it's a good idea, I don't care. Unless I'm convinced, I'm not going to be working on it. Prepare, polish, present, revise, repeat until you feel ready. Only then you should submit. Never submit the first round of the paper. It will likely be rejected. Few concluding remarks, idea and research question. A simple test. The idea must be intuitive, but not obvious. Okay, people should say, okay, I didn't think about it like that, but what you're saying makes sense. So that's a good idea. Clearly defined. State in a few words that ends in a question mark. Can you write your research question in 10 words or less that ends in a question mark? If you cannot, then your idea is not clear. Execution. Execution follows the story. So if you're telling a story, make sure the execution follows the same logic as the story. Begin with simple intuitive tests and then follow by more rigorous. Let's not start with heavy high-tech testing unless we begin with simple intuitive tests. Make sure the execution is comprehensive, thorough, and internally consistent, which means one test cannot say X is positively related to Y, and then some other test somewhere else shows that X is negatively related to Y. That's grounds for rejection right away. Exposition, clear, easy to follow, well organized, polished, and formatting is important. If you're making a table, make sure it fits in one page. If it goes to the next page, the heading should be repeated, simple stuff like this. Emphasize where necessary so the message is not lost. So that's another. So just the summary of all this. I just want to end with a couple of philosophical thoughts. The first is motivation versus inspiration. The main difference is motivation is external. Inspiration is internal. I don't need anything to be inspired. To do truly good research, you must be inspired. You must be passionate by it. Only then it will sustain you for those 3-4 years that it takes to really publish at the top level. Aim to write at least one influential paper. Okay, just even if you do one, it's really, really good. That's what I find. I mean, I'm yet to do that, but I will really try. Pride and prejudice. Have pride in your work, but avoid prejudice in your findings. Don't hang your hat and say, people have these prejudices. Oh, I'm sure that, large companies are better than small companies. Why? Let the data decide. A good researcher will not have any prejudice. They will be agnostic to the outcome. Let the data decide. That's what I'm looking. If I know the answer, why am I doing research? I'm doing research to find the answer. So let me not anticipate an answer. Treat this as a way of life, not just a profession. Good researchers, I find, will question everything. Even like, simple things. Why does round pizza come in a square box? Everything they're curious about it. Publishing in top academic journals is hard, but it's not that hard. That's exactly why it's worth it. So there is just, that threshold. It's like climbing Mount Everest without oxygen. So not quite. Climbing Everest is a lot harder, but I'm just saying. I have also included for you the UT Dallas journal ranking list. This is a list of 27 journals that most academics would consider top tier. And then there is an expanded list of 50 journals by the Financial Times, which is also a good list for you to choose from if you want to publish and look for outlets. This covers all business disciplines. So I think it's a very good list to start with, to go by. So I target these lists, and I have been fortunate to publish 5 or 6 articles in these list. So. Well, thank you all very much, and I will now stay for questions. So please, Muhammad, all yours. Let me know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm kind of speechless. I'm heartbroken. I was looking for this thing since I was a graduate student. I wanted someone to guide me and tell me what to do exactly. What's the right things to be done in order for me to publish in a good.
You're too kind. Let me stop sharing the screen. Okay.
And then I would like to praise Dr. Al-Hnayan. In fact, I just found that he is in his clinic. He's a physician, and he just devoted his time to attend while he was moving from the screen to screen. Oh. He was seeing his patients, and yeah, he's actually, and he's a vice president of the science. The Health Science Center and the Vice President of Academic Support.
Oh.
So, and then please, I would like you all to forgive me for not explaining the rule of this. I was kind of squeezed with time when I introduced Dr. Anand, that it's not a webinar, it's a kind of a live meeting, so that everyone can share and ask after the end of the speech or the talk. So if anyone has something to ask or to discuss, he can raise the hand. I can see Dr. Yaqub Abdullah. Do you have a question?
Yes, hi, thank you, Anand. Very, very nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if you can hear me well.
I can. Thank you for the kind words.
This was really interesting, and it brought back memories from when we were in graduate school.
Yeah. Sorry if I made it very. I mean, I'm sure most of you know all this stuff, but I like to hear it all the time. So
great. This is great. We really enjoyed it. I have, to be honest, I have lots of comments, but I want to make time for my colleagues. But I just want to focus on one thing. You mentioned towards the end about the Me Too ideas.
Yes.
That we need less. We need to work. We don't need to replicate some ideas that have been published in top journals. For example, many the top journals are US focused. They published based on data set maybe in the US or developed countries. But I saw many examples where, for example, does X cause Y? The case of China, the case of GCC countries, Kuwait. So I have seen that. So how do we reconcile to do Me Too ideas versus a novel test that is for our part of the world, for example, or China for that matter?
Let me explain that. So all this China papers or the Swedish example that I gave you, yes, they are using data from a different part of the world to answer a question that has not previously been answered. It is not possible to answer that question with US data. So the point I'm making is that China data gives you something extra which is not there in the regular standard CompuStat, regular US data or European data. So they're using that extra bit to answer some unanswered question. But the point I was making is, suppose you say, effect of X on Y is positive in the US data. What is it in emerging markets? Now, I think those kinds of papers have definitely they will be published, but I am talking about the top, 2-3 journals. So yes, some of them will go through, but the probability is a little lower than the regular original idea. That's all I was trying to say.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful, because we struggle here in our part of the world because we don't have so many data sets that most schools in the US has. So we try most of the times test some of these theories that are well established in the literature based on our own economies. So, for example, since we don't have taxes here in GCC countries.
We lost you there. I think the voice is.
Sorry. So many questions that we raise in our research focus on, for example, on taxes. Since there are no taxes in GCC countries and there are taxes in developed countries, so how this well-established idea in the developed countries have an effect here. So that's why we maybe try to test some of these theories in a tax-free environment. And we don't want to use the Me Too ideas thing that you mentioned. So that was helpful. Yeah.
So that's very good. Yeah. So definitely. I mean, if the US wants to know what will happen when they reduce taxes, you're taking it to the extreme and say, okay, here's what will happen when there are no taxes. So it does help answer a question which these people cannot answer with their data.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Anand, I have to go chronologically with the thanks notes to you, then we'll go back to the questions. I mean, Dr. Abdullah Sanad said, thank you, Professor, very, very helpful lecture. Dr. Daril Hwail said, thank you for the great presentation. Dr. Sulaiman Jassar, a great thank you. Dr. Majdi Qutaina, concise and informative thanks. Well, it keeps moving now very fast. Dr. Mshari Nad, very useful, and thanks. Dr. Sanad, I've just said that. Dr. Munira, thank you. This was very informative. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to you. Dr. Zainab, thank you, Dr. Anand, for the information and concise presentation. Thank you. Working collaboratively, that's Dr. Al-Marzouk. Where the norms, this is a question. I'm going to go back to him again. Okay. Dr. Mohammed Saud, thank you, Dr. Anand. It was very informative presentation. Great presentation from Dr. Ahmed Al-Anizi. Dr. Hani Sarraf, thank you, Dr. Anand. And well, they're thanking me too, but you're the one to be thanked. Thank you for your time. That's Dr. Sharif Azamoun. Valuable insight, Professor. Well, it keeps running now. I cannot follow.
Okay, that's fine.
Everyone is saying thank you.
Yeah,
now I'm going to go back to the questions.
Yes.
Now, for those who don't know how to do it, you just hover around the 3 dots, and I'm sorry, next to the 3 dots there is a sign of a hand. You click on it, and you just tell me if you want to ask. Now, Doctor, I'll go by names. I'm sorry. Dr. Ali Huwaidi.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for this kind of presentation. Thanks, Dr. Zainal, for organizing this events. Just asking a question about what you mentioned in sheet number 5 about the originality, the relevant of the research. So in empirical studies, normally we review the literature and find something like the correlation or the regression or something between X, Y are in some result positive, other results negative. So the third is neutral, the correlation between the 2 variables. Even if you have some control variables, it will affect the relevance of any other additional empirical research, although so the idea is very old, from 1980, 1990, something like that, for what you mentioned on sheet number 5